Ever wonder why people do what they do? And how can this question lead to the meaning of life? Let me introduce you to a concept called the spectrum of understanding. This term innately, and by no accident, parallels the scientific comprehension of the visible light spectrum. As many of you may know, it was Sir Isaac Newton who reported back in 1665 his discovery of the light spectrum by shining a light beam through a glass prism. Newton is also known for inventing calculus and providing a clear understanding of optics. He also made significant advances in the study of forces, specifically by developing the universal laws of gravitation and motion. Now let's gravitate and turn our lenses to and focus on the exploration of the term, the spectrum of understanding, and how an observation of light can turn into a tool to observe humankind. But first, an introduction. The spectrum of understanding is a term coined by modern thinking author Emerson Ryan in his book The Last Religion, which focuses on unlocking a transcendental philosophy, a coupling point for all societies, cultures, religions and businesses, etc., worldwide. Yes, we can do it, with the dissemination of scientific observations and logic, and with a couple other very special ingredients we will get to shortly, with the ultimate goal of world peace. A goal he and others aligned know to be very attainable. Here is the beginning of this philosophy. Visualize, if you will, a light gradient or spectrum. There, you got it. Now suppose you were instead looking at the range of a person's overall comprehension of life. Right off, we all understand that there are wild ranges of intellect and emotional intelligence. But the goal is not to highlight those differences in order to wax your relative ego, no. It is instead a tool of empathy that can have a profound impact on society's social and emotional intelligence while navigating the systems of life. We just need your help to implement it. Now, given there is such a wild range of spectrums of understanding, we all know that this is what really makes social encounters tricky to navigate sometimes. It's no secret that opinions have been weaponized against us all. I mean, say what you will, but you can't escape from action and reaction. However, at some point, we all have to grow up and get past this relative communication problem for the world to get anything done. Just have a look at the news and tell me that there isn't something really wrong with how we do things if we want to, or are bombarding the other side of the neighborhood. We cannot let this become the new norm. Therefore, we must fight the coming narrative, and we do this with logic and empathy. We can fix this, and we start by not identifying a person as an immediate representation of a culture. We know it's not just about food or clothing or even spiritual practices. No, we must get a better understanding of what the word culture should mean and where it applies. First, have a look at the standard definition in an alternate window on your web browser, then unpause. You done? Okay, so let's establish an updated baseline understanding right here and now. You and I are firstly individuals. Our observations are firstly individual and ultimately and objectively subjective. This is regardless of what culture we identify with. Culture is an auxiliary definition used to identify idiosyncrasies of a group, which is reduced down to the stereotypes, which is kryptonite to our collective cohesion. Which is, if you think about it for a moment, a set of algorithms we identify as our skill set that we utilize as we navigate the systems of life. What you think you comprehend deeply, another may not perceive at all, and vice versa. As obvious as this all sounds, what is important to note is that this relative identity we each tout is also a representation. It is the sum of our, now pay attention to the wording here, our quasi-skills we adamantly believe to be optimally honed ones. And the other major asset here is another insight in the book that is really great for demystifying human behavior, called the formula of the self, which is, screenshot here, social conditioning is derived from environmental factors, economic factors, and genetic inheritance. Ryan believes that the combination of these two terms and synergy created is ultimately why people take action in the first place, no matter the consequence. Well, it's true. After all, whom do you trust more than yourself to do the right thing? You think you're in the right. even when you're absolutely wrong. Even when you climb through that drive-through window to divine justice to those who forgot your catsup in your order. Come on now. Of course, curly fries is supposed to automatically come with catsup. Now look what you've made me do. Now, a quick word from our sponsor, Einstein, a name we all have come to know as a synonym of genius personified. Now, let's hear one of his many consciousness-expanding quotes. "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant." Einstein was also a man who solved for X spectacularly, authoring the theory of relativity, which fundamentally changed humankind's understanding of space and time. As you can see, the theory of relativity, which was recently proven as fact, posits that observers can see the same event differently depending on their relative speeds and the gravitational fields they experience, which describes the movement of an individual and their perceptions of things relative to them, and their interpretation of it, all of which describes the term, the spectrum of understanding. Isn't science cool? You'll come to find that any phenomena you see playing out before your eyes has an underlying science to it. Literally everything. You may have not realized it before, but that is one of the important nodes of understanding that we will connect today. Now don't fall asleep on me, all right? And tape your eyelids open if you have to. We got a ways to go here. I know this is really hard to keep focused now, a daze due to the programming we have all received. Honestly, think of what's at stake here and let's power through this, okay? Now, back to this paradigm-changing deprogramming. You can see how we could consider these two scientific factual discoveries and concepts as a valid base formula which should be fundamental as any other law that governs our reality. You and even today's AI would more than likely try and dismiss the findings of physical science as analogous to human behavior. However, fundamentally, everything at its absolute base is energy. We were shown this with Einstein's formula E equals mc squared, also known as the energy mass equivalence equation. We could go further to prove this, but I believe it's widely known at this point, and the point being is that all of this energy which is housed in the universe adheres to a set of laws, and this would not excuse energy in any form it takes, including human social behavior and observation. Divide all you want, but you might be cut by Occam's razor if you do. Ryan further attributes, like many other scientific minds, that all aspects of our reality is also a chemical or a mathematical one. After all, if everything is underlyingly energy, then the universe speaks in all dialects simultaneously. Layers and layers of energy phase changed from its base is what creates our reality. Which means it's the same for our social reality as well, isn't it? Now it is of utmost importance that we all come to agree on this particular measurement. Because looking at the current consensus of analysis of social phenomenon, you really can see that the layers and layers of complexity have been confounding our social interactions to the degree that all people really have time for is the face value of an event that concerns them the most. One shocking tragedy after another, which means no chance at unification if we are not allowed to focus. To the key holders of the narrative, we are like cats chasing the overpowered laser pointer. And while we are burning our retinas out, they toss us the catnip to smooth things over. Cope hard, my friends. To make matters worse is when further attempts to finding a reason are found. Sadly, the cause in most is deemed to be wholly superficial. If this were not true, then there would be accountability. Come on, think about it. Get past the stereotypes and get down to the real core of the issue. Oh, it's much deeper than you realize, you'll see. But good luck holding those people accountable for their actions to the degree that it causes a positive change in their respective cultures. And since we could not even begin to call the justice system we have an almost worst-case scenario here, with the ever-trending and devolving spectrum of social justice. And it's as plain as day that social justice was engineered and incentivized to the degree it's at currently. Why, even putting one tiny toe out of what's considered the two flavors of mainstream narrative and a counterculture will go to work on you in a very public way. On an individual level, however, it's extremely hard for someone who has not been authorized subconsciously by the narrative to change another person's spectrum of understanding. Quite literally, you cannot tell anyone anything because there is a cipher that must be unlocked beforehand, which is called the formula of leadership. This is why suicide by policemen is still relatively a rare occasion. But my God, they sure do overstep their boundaries more often than they should now, don't they? Well, one thing at a time, we must delve deeper to get to the core of all the world's issues in order to fix the subcategories. The formula of leadership will have to have its own video. Another caveat, Ryan states, is that some will take the symbolism of the spectrum of understanding and the formula of the self and go too far with it. Attempting to turn it into some IQ analysis is an auto-fail, because we all know is not a true measurement of intellect anyways. If you don't know this already, Google is your friend. Well, sometimes. Anywho, Ryan says ego is one of the big problems we face when we socialize, which is the assumption that we are better than others around us. It's not to say that knowledge and expertise should be ignored, but we are focused on the base value of a person. Therefore, trying to use it to compare yourself to another means you are completely missing the point. It's a symbolic spectrum of understanding, therefore ultimately arbitrary due to relativity. It's similar to trying to measure the superposition of atoms. No need to point because they're all over the place. Yet, for the sake of a visual aid, in a classical sense you could superimpose blind ignorance on the low end of the visible spectrum, and on the opposite end is the human version of what could be universal awareness. And each one of us fit in there somewhere in between these relative poles. Let's, however, acknowledge the fact that a baseline of the philosophy of communication is not commonly taught. And when it is, it's in select college-level degrees, and the lack of it is a severe detriment to society as a whole. Furthermore, the efficacy of this training has never really been questioned, and finally ask yourself, has it been working? We could go much deeper here, but for the time being, let's trudge on to the overall goal. Ryan believes society decouples from the attempt at establishing a baseline for communication via critical thinking because the norm in any timeline is also synonymous with the mundane. Less stimulus equals less fun, and we've seen countless times humans even risk their own lives and the people around them while dismissing the mundane. Citing traffic violations which lead to accidents as a very basic example, as well as other highly compelling evidence like the historical repetition of conflicts, economic bubbles and crises, and environmental neglect, to name a few. This phenomenon, he believes, shows that we are all relatively evolving as individuals, but objectively devolving as a whole simultaneously as we grow in age. We literally buy into the illusion of prosperity because of relative advances in technology which provide a buffer to our perceived comfort and longevity. Driving to the underlying factor, he states, we are the victims of generational dissociative amnesia. To a degree, this is natural, but it's hard not to notice that the goalposts of achievement in society are always moved just outside of reach, every 8 to 12 years, give or take a few. The key holders to power we all know and refer to as they stifle the economic mobility of the slave class with impunity, which over time also serves as a form of gaslighting, hobbling the masses from ever attaining a foothold on what they perceive to be their power. That's right, I said slaves, meaning you and me, because even a decorated cage with the latest gaming systems is still just a cage. Furthermore, we are not allowed to slow down to effectively lay blame because, just for instance, 50% of the US makes less than $30,000 a year, and that's not accounting for the unemployed or homeless, or the percentage of population that are one paycheck or one disaster from being put out on the street. And for those who are just outside of immediate danger, this video is especially for you. Because you have likely exchanged what was your potential destiny for some relative security, traded for fate. The key holders to power need you because you are the backbone of complacency to this predicament, which is not meant to offend. After all, you were programmed to accept it. Hopefully this incursion has found a pulse, because this message is for all classes. This is why, for the sake of all our relative understanding, in the now, we have no choice but to simplify the madness of it all. Therefore, we are unable to hold those responsible for perpetuating classism accountable for their actions. The really sad thing is that we are mistaking living for surviving. This highlights a formula in itself. When life isn't going the way we planned, it is not living, it's surviving, which is sustained through embellishment, coping, and validation, which in turn provides us with a plethora of chemical compounds our brains release in order to keep us going. Ouch! Hard lessons do hurt, don't they? If so, then why have we not seemed to have learned as a whole? Ah, yes, it's all becoming clearer now, isn't it? As a side note, when that is not enough, given this endless cycle of systemic abuse, it should come to no surprise that, statistically, there is a percentage of people who are prone to find solace in this dystopia by injecting poison into their veins. They do this likely to escape reality with drugs that have a 100% addiction rate, and as well are highly likely to kill you on the spot. Or why, when tragedy strikes, that some see it as opportunity to loot and destroy, but realize that no matter what the level or method, while under duress, that survive, cope, embellish and validate equates to copium. Let's zoom out now and look at the even bigger picture. How the heck do we fix things at this point, beyond the point of no return? Ironically, none of this is a secret anymore, but it seems we're stuck because people have an inherent misunderstanding of how to react properly, because they haven't realized that the solution to all these problems lies elsewhere. We ask, whose fault is this? Then we settle on our spectrum of understanding's most logical conclusion. But you would be only dealing with more copium if you went that route, because the problem literally is with the question. Now, many come to a boiling point while in the midst of suffering and plead to their God whilst on their knees sobbing, "Please tell me, what is the point of all this?" Which is rhetorical in that moment, but any time we ask that question for whatever reason, you'd be on the right track. The problem lies within the typical answer to that question. So let's extrapolate the word quest from the ultimate question. Yes, I'm going there. Let's ask that question now. What is the meaning of life? To find out, let's do some symbolic number crunching. After all, the universe is also made up of information, so what is the prime factor of everything ever said and done? What does everything and everyone in the world equate to? Let us finally answer for the greatest X of all time, for the real and only X that matters in this life. To answer this question, humankind has formulated an amalgamation of religions in an attempt to fulfill the criteria of this epic fetch quest. But most, if not all, religions seem only to be able to teach the lesson of how and why fire burns. So until we can properly define the greatest X, and as painful it is to hear this, yes, even everything in religion is ritualistic copium. Woo, we're playing with fire now, aren't we? That fire was extinguished long ago. Now, let's hear from another one of our sponsors. Plato, considered one of the fathers of Western philosophy, in 380 BC wrote a very famous story, the allegory of the cave. In the tale, prisoners in a cave perceive reality solely through shadows cast on the wall, believing these shadows to be the totality of existence. One prisoner, freed and exposed to the outside world, experiences a profound shift in understanding, no longer seeing only shadows, but objects, and eventually the sun, the source of light. It seems that the freed prisoner's spectrum of understanding was dramatically increased from that ordeal, albeit relatively. Yes, many have heard and analysed this story. It's a staple of philosophy after all. But what if life is actually a series of caves and not just one? Well, now, that sentiment really seems applicable in our timeline, doesn't it? That's right. Again, it doesn't matter if you decorate your cave with holy symbols, or if you give your pocket change to a random drifter now and then. It doesn't even matter if you are an upstanding citizen and you call your mum once a week, it's still a cave. Maybe it's cozy now, but relative security in exchange for detachment from utter chaos just outside your walls should never have been considered a trade at all. Do I need to even say it? Mass extinction of the people of the world is happening daily. People are suffering in degrees wholly abstract to you because your key holders filter you from it. If your answer sounds something like, "Oh well, that's life for you," or "Welcome to the real world," or the most epic cope of all, it's all in God's hands then. Truly, unless your spectrum of understanding expands exponentially, then all in all you're just another brick in the wall. While we are unable to define the meaning of life, then even spiritual awakening is relative and ultimately subjective. Therefore, in true Platonic fashion, any semblance of advancement humanity has had is a quasi or classic form, thus proving the following phenomenon of society's mass generational dissociative amnesia, which manifests its ugliness in our everyday lives, which means we are all still prisoners and we never left the cave. We just identify this newly found ceiling as the sky. Having this knowledge, you might wonder if any of us has truly lived. Ryan proposes our current prime factoring shows that our spiritual vibration as a whole makes the universe appear to act and react as if it were merely a perpetual motion machine. Everything within it, including you and I, are merely cogs in what resembles a machine often built by university physics and engineering students and enthusiasts dubbed the Rube Gold, which is a deliberately over-engineered machine that performs simple tasks in a very complex fashion, usually including a chain reaction. And according to the latest analysis upon further looks into the background radiation, it looks like we've been doing this for roughly 13 billion years, with billions to go until our solar system collides with our nearest neighbor. Doing what exactly? Learning lessons about karma? Then if that were really true, then in one reality you die for what you believe in, even if it were not objective reality. And in another you would have to kill for what you believe in. Or is it the lessons being taught in war zones, or the lessons learned from domestic violence? Truly though, do you think that is a lesson that God wants us to learn? That is a reality I do not wish to manifest. This might cause a shudder, but really think now of all the other quote-unquote lessons we would have to endure to just plain experience the American dream. Looks like we've settled on a lesser version of life now, doesn't it? With billions upon billions of years under our belt, just how many lessons are there? Given the time frame, it can't be the lessons we have simplified for ourselves, because by now we would have all unlocked those achievements one way or another. This is especially so if choice is a thing and relative moralism is subjective. If not, then it's not just key lessons we're experiencing, it's all lessons. Not just lessons of the human perspective, but that of where we came from, stardust. Even smaller than that, even more than that. Underlyingly, we are all energy. Given the time period, if you play that game, then we're here for the infinite long haul. Thankfully, Ryan suggests that this is a fundamental error in our measurements of our role in all this chaos. To solve for the real X, we need to really zoom out. I mean, way out, farther than you or your neighbors or churches or state or countries or philosophies or religions' perception, and do your very best at taking a look at things with a new lens, a universal spectrum of understanding. At this point, you can understand why agreement of redefining a baseline of social behavior of humankind would be a key element in the blueprints, which is actually a turnkey operation once the switch is flipped. Because once we agree at defining the greatest X, the meaning of life, then work towards making it the norm, which is essential, then in turn the natural balance will return to solve every other problem in the world. Which is the answers to all the social conditioning, environmental factors, economic factors, and even genetic inheritance ones. Once you hear the solution, you will most likely be triggered into having an involuntary emotional riot, because we have been avoiding the answer to the greatest X in the most humanistic fashion. We've been avoiding any semblance of the route to true transcendence. And when you hear it, you'll think, oh, the irony of ironies. You'll know that the conception of spiritual hell, where the weeping and the gnashing of teeth in all the holy books, was the one we made for ourselves here on earth. This is because the answer was right in our faces since the beginning. It's all so tragically perfect. The very definition of duality of this reality is that from the top down, it is designed to accentuate contrast, and look where our false perceptions have brought us. By now, you are frothing at the mouth, no doubt, and wondering what is the answer to the greatest X, and what is the goal for the last religion. Let us instead tear down the walls of iniquity. Energy and the phase changes of it are a series of choices that in result manifested this dystopia. But I have life-saving news. It is still energy. This reality is not static. Therefore, it's still just as malleable. Let me tell you now, I have seen the blueprints for this endeavor. Deep down, I know this information to be true, and it looks and feels really good, like exhaling for the first time in my life. Therefore, I can say with elation that I choose, as all members of the last religion do, to no longer accept this veil upon my eyes as the norm. We will navigate the systems of life with our vision unshrouded, while utilizing the universal spectrum of understanding. We have all been living in a false system. Sadly, no stretch of imagination is needed there. Let's take a moment and wipe the tears away from our eyes, because to live shouldn't have to hurt this much. We can enact change, and you will be happy to hear that. To be aligned with the last religion's spectrum of understanding, to become a member, we do not require a dedication of a soul or any ritual worship of any god. No more with pseudo-survival, because it isn't living, therefore we are done, and I mean done with the embellishment, cope and validation of the false system. Yet understand that we wish for you to willfully walk on the path we will forge. Therefore, we absolutely encourage you to keep the spiritual connection you believe you have. For just as we let go of the hands of our mothers and fathers as we learn to walk, God is doing the same thing for us until we are fully ready. And because the last religion is not a standalone complex, we are the true spirit of energy doing what it was always innately supposed to do, and that is to create a human version of balance in the universe. For this manifestation of the last religion is an amalgamation of all the affirmations of the purity and longing to be one with the universe. To have come throughout this hell history and still be able to solve for the greatest and only true X means that we can finally escape the cycle. Each point of information that humankind found worthy of contributing to solving the world's problems are puzzle pieces of the answer to the question which is in every mystery of life we have ever witnessed. And you can guarantee that all those standing on just the other side of this life, existing in the higher realms, are cheering for us now like they never have before. It is the veritable background information that has bled through from objective reality, directly from our higher self, affirmations birthed via abstract thought, and then expressed through various mediums and in time are formed into what's known as affirmation constants, as they go on to make up the spiritual word and works of humankind. Don't be so hard on yourself for not realizing the true answer, because everything is firstly abstract. Even the creation of the universe started from nothing. From that nothing came everything. And from our viewpoint, we are the center of the universe. And if it is not true, we must at least accept it as symbology. And more importantly, we accept that human life and the earth and all its life forms as sacred. Therefore, if it has not dawned upon you before, then let us make an official announcement. Given our timeline, it would make sense that not just fairness or the false system's version of equality, but apex equality to be our sacred quest. Yes, this is the answer to the greatest X. The meaning of life is to attain the true form of equality in the flesh. If our goal is anything short of lifting the collective up simultaneously and erasing all forms of disparity, and we do not define it as our purpose, our sacred duty, then nothing is sacred and nothing matters at all. Ryan feels so strongly about this that he likens the failure to hear this call is like missing the proverbial rapture or the coming or return of the Messiah, or conveniently forgetting the reason for incarnation. Because due to the nature of this reality, everything outside of equality naturally leads to paradoxical misunderstandings. Ironically, getting caught up with the mundanities of life, or what he often refers to as the dissonant human ambience of it all, is the definition of the human condition. Ryan says that we are mistaken for always looking to the skies, awaiting for the holy protagonist to return, citing a well-known scripture. He states that it's true that the kingdom of heaven is inside you. Therefore, the outward form of empowerment as a call to action is yet another slight misunderstanding of our place in the universe. The deepest of introspection is key to fixing the self. While in there, just post your return from the bottom of all your problems, you will see undoubtedly that a baseline of ubiquitous equality would inherently fix all the world's problems. At that point you will truly see, with unshrouded eyes, the universal spectrum of understanding. At that point you will know that you are the universe. The universe is inside you and is all around you. Therefore, naturally, we are all one. Ryan adds one caveat to the realization of the one and only true main quest in this life, that will in turn allow us all to truly live for the first time. Keep your spiritual beliefs, but understand that this true form of awakening will only continue to be true if your main goals are in alignment with the last religion. Believe that you will get your chance to be a part of the process. We must act with intent. It must be as a whole, and it will require mass manifestation, which of course entails hard work. All religions seek this mission one way or another. but fail to see that it can only be found upon the establishment of equality. All religions strive so hard to pry open the higher dimensional box of awakening, enlightenment, miracles, and so on, never realizing the attainment of paradise on earth is not up to the gods in heavens, it's up to us. You want a real connection to your higher self? Well, we have to act as one first. No magical or mystical powers or spirit needed, just establish society at the base as equal, and then build up from that. The reward of spirit, however, is immeasurable. We must raise our collective vibrational frequency in unison, or the average will always keep us in a static place. Look at what we've manifested for ourselves currently, and you will know this is true. Just imagine the perception gained once we all agree that this is the only way. It is the movement of the proverbial mountain. Members of the last religion believe that in order to escape the plight of the NPC, we must firstly dismiss any promise of the eternal and 100% invest in equality here on earth, otherwise what's the point of being here? We are so happy you got to hear this message today, and we know there is so much more to talk about. Thankfully, we can analyze anything through the universal spectrum of understanding. If you have a question, any question at all, leave it in the comments and await our reply patiently. If this introductory message of the TLR, that's short for the last religion, resonates with you, then you are ready to hear the message from the universe. If you feel your higher self emerging to harmonize with us, then visit At Last Religion DFW on YouTube and await more videos here on TikTok and coming soon to other platforms. Currently, YouTube has the full audiobook, and feel free to explore our other videos that delve into various topics and more. Also, if you can truly resonate and can sing this particular type of song, then we invite you to collaborate in further content creation for TLR's channel. If you have another skill and you'd like to contribute now or in the future, then please drop us a message. Now, stay tuned for the message of the universe and get ready to have a great life as a member of the last religion.